Imagine yourself standing at the edge of a vast, snow-draped field, the world hushed beneath a thick, white quilt. The air is crisp, biting gently at the tips of your ears, while the faint crunch of snow beneath your boots sends a shiver of sound upward, dissipating into the stillness. Overhead, the sky is a deep gray blue, softening as twilight spills across it, casting a silvery glow that dances on every flake. The distant murmur of a frozen stream hums beneath the silence, a quiet pulse threading through the earth, while the soft rustling of pine needles sways in a breeze you can barely feel, a cool whisper brushing your cheek. Each breath you take blooms in faint clouds, curling upward, then vanishing into the vastness. The snow falls slow and deliberate, each flake catching the dim light, a tiny prism tumbling to rest. You feel the chill settle into your fingertips, a gentle weight, as if the cold is tracing the lines of your hands. Somewhere beyond the trees, a low, resonant echo, a branch bending under snow, perhaps rolls faintly through the air, stirring the quiet. It's a sound that feels familiar, like something you've known, but can't yet place, lingering at the edges of your mind. The field stretches endlessly before you, its edges blurring into a soft haze, and with each step, the snow shifts, a tender sigh rising from the ground. The hush wraps around you, thick and comforting. Yet there's a pull, something unspoken, a presence or a memory hovering just out of reach, its shape undefined, but growing heavier in the stillness. Beneath this quiet, there's a weight you carry, isn't there? A clamor of expectations that once roared loud demands from years ago when your shoulders felt broader, when the days seemed to bend to your will. You remember the mornings you woke with purpose pulsing through you, the way you stride into the world unshaken. Now, those steps falter sometimes, don't they? The mirror shows lines etched deeper, a tiredness that settles in your bones, a task once simple, now a mountain to climb. The noise of what you asterisk should asterisk be, of strength unyielding, of answers always at hand, presses against your chest, heavy as wet snow. There's a longing too, a quiet ache for when life felt lighter, when the laughter came easy, and the silence wasn't so full of questions. You see it in the faded echo of a late-night talk, the warmth of a fire that once crackled beside you, now just a memory dimmed by time. The world expects you still to lead, to fix, to endure, and it's exhausting, isn't it? To feel that pull, that unspoken rule that a man must always stand tall, even when the wind cuts cold and sharp. Doubt creeps in, soft but persistent, whispering that you've lost something vital, something you can't name. Fatigue wraps around you like a second skin, and beneath it, a nostalgia for a version of yourself you're not sure still exists. And yet, through the hush, there's a sound of voice, perhaps, or the ghost of one faint but growing, tugging at the edges of your thoughts. It's been there all along, hasn't it? A murmur from a winter long past, calling softly, not with judgment, but with something warmer, something you can almost touch. It weaves through the stillness, threading between the cracks of your weariness, promising to meet you where you stand. From the haze of falling snow, a figure emerges, a confidant from a winter's night, his presence as familiar as the creak of an old wooden porch. His coat is dusted with frost, his breath a soft plume in the air, and his voice comes low and steady, like the hum of a fire settling into embers. "You've been out here a while," he says, stepping closer, the faint crunch of his boots blending with the whisper of snowflakes kissing the ground. The air carries the scent of pine and damp wool, sharp and grounding, and you feel the gentle warmth of his nearness against the cold. "Do you remember that night?" he asks, his words curling into the stillness. You see it then, the glow of a lantern swaying in your hand, its light spilling across a frozen lake, the ice gleaming like polished glass. The wind had howled that evening, but you'd laughed through it, your voice bouncing off the trees as you tugged your scarf tighter. The snow had piled high, and the two of you had carved a path, your boots sinking deep, the cold stinging your cheeks until they burned red. There's the sound of mittens brushing snow from a bench, a crisp clap that echoes faintly now, and the feel of icy flakes melting against your skin as you stood there, fearless in the storm. "And that other time," he continues, his tone softening, "when the world went quiet, you're there again inside this time, the window frosted over, the distant clink of a kettle simmering on the stove. The room smelled of cedar and coffee, and the silence was a gift, wasn't it? You sat together, watching the snow bury the earth outside. No words needed, just the steady rhythm of your breathing and the faint tick of a clock. That hush, it held you then, strong and sure." His voice dips lower, unraveling the suspense that's lingered. "There was one night more," he says, "when you thought the weight would break you. You see it clearly now, the snow falling thick, the sky pressing down, and you standing alone until he found you. The crunch of his steps had cut through your fog, and his hand on your shoulder had been warm, solid. You're enough, he'd said, and the words had settled into you, quieting the storm within. The memory glows now, vivid against the snow. A thread of strength you'd forgotten you still held. You're still that man, he says, his voice wrapping around you like the faint warmth of a hearth through an open door. The noise, it's loud, I know. The expectations, the years piling up. The way they shout for more when you've already given so much. But listen, feel this. The snow falls softer now, a delicate patter against your coat, and the breeze carries a tender heat, brushing your neck like a sigh. You don't have to carry it all. You never did. His words sink in slow, a balm spreading through the cracks, and you feel your shoulders ease, just a little. You fought hard, he continues, his tone lifting, steady and bright. Every step through the cold, every time you stood when you wanted to fall, that's courage, not failure. The world doesn't see it, but I do. You're not less for feeling the weight, you're more for holding it so long. The distant chime of ice cracking on a branch rings faintly, a clear note in the hush, and it feels like a nod to your endurance. You're allowed to rest now, to let the snow settle. It's not surrender, it's strength choosing peace. He pauses, letting the silence bloom, then speaks again, his voice rich with years of knowing. This quiet, it's not an end, it's a transformation. Expectations scream because they're afraid of stillness, but stillness is where you grow. Think of the snow, it falls, it blankets, it softens the sharp edges. That night I found you when you thought you lost your way. It wasn't weakness that kept you standing. It was you, raw and real, letting the hush strip away the noise. That's your power still, finding calm as snowflakes settle softly, blanketing your worries in stillness. The memory unfolds fully now, his hand on your shoulder, the storm fading, and you breathing free beneath a sky that no longer pressed down. Time doesn't take from you, he adds, wise and warm. It carves you deeper, like a river through stone. You're not the man you were, not because you've lost, but because you've become. The noise of what asterisk should asterisk be. It's just wind passing through. Let it go. What stays is what matters. The rustling of leaves beneath the snow returns, faint and soothing, tying you back to the field, and a peace settles in your chest, heavy but light, like a blanket laid just right. The snow falls slower now, each flake drifting like a whisper against the earth, and the confidant's voice softens further, a gentle ebb in the stillness. It's time for me to step back, he says, his words fading into the hush. But this quiet, it's yours to keep. The field glows faintly, the silvery light pooling around you, and the air feels warmer, as if the cold has curled inward to rest. The distant murmur of the stream hums low, a lullaby threading through the pines, while the breeze brushes your skin one last time, carrying the scent of frost and cedar into the night. Look how far we've come, he murmurs, his presence thinning like mist over the snow. From the storm to this, a hush that holds you steady. You've walked through the noise, felt its weight, and here you are, still standing. The crunch of snow beneath his boots grows faint, a tender echo fading across the field, and you feel the softness of the ground beneath you, the cool touch of flakes melting on your hands. The sky deepens, stars pricking through the gray, and the world feels vast yet close, a cradle of calm rocking you gently. "Take this with you," he whispers, his voice a breath on the wind, "and let it settle in your bones." The rustling of pine needles sways once more, a final sigh, and then silence, pure, unbroken, wrapping you like a promise kept. The journey lingers in your chest, warm and whole, a stillness that doesn't demand, but simply is. "Tell me of a moment that lingers in your heart," he adds, soft as snow falling, inviting you to share below when you're ready. And with that, the field is yours alone, the snow blanketing the earth in quiet waves, the air cool and clean against your face. The hush of this snowy evening holds you, steady and sure, a peace that stretches endless into the night. Goodbye, for now, a tender, lingering goodbye.